Hello, everybody. Welcome to this very special day. I haven't done an interview in a while, and I'm so excited to be doing it again, getting back in the seat, into the swing of things, so to speak. I have with me a wonderful creator of a very interesting and a very cool and unique project platform. We'll get into it more. But hello, Varun. How are you this fine? I almost said festive day. It's definitely not. It's just a day. It's a Monday. How are you on this Monday?
I was gonna say, yeah, it's a Monday. That was gonna be my exact response. But I mean, I'm doing well. Lots of exciting things going on for us, so keeping
Yay.
busy.
Oh, perfect. Excellent. Varun, we've chatted a teeny tiny bit, but I would like to be introduced and have everyone else also be introduced to who the heck you are, what the heck you kind of do. Give us a little promotion of yourself.
Sure. I'm Varun, like Maroon 5, take the V, put at the beginning. And the whole thing I do is I'm a TTRPG writer myself, and I created a virtual tabletop that was kind of solving, I think, a problem I didn't really feel like had a solution when I started it. That solution is called Hedron. In short, we're trying to be everything. Like people in these interviews will always ask me, what does Hedron do? I kind of say it's easier to say what we don't do, basically. Pretty much the only thing we don't do is like video. Like we say like, oh, instead of trying to beat Discord, just go use Discord and we'll help you use Discord rather than trying to beat Discord at being Discord. But otherwise, we have maps, we have like system management, home brewing, like lore management, everything in one place. The idea was kind of a long time ago, right? 7 years ago, 8 years ago, there was really no way to do DMing without needing like 6 subscriptions to like 6 different websites, and then you have to like jump between them.
I remember those days.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not even that much better now. Like you still need like a Roll20, and then you need like a Foundry, and then you need like a Owlbear radio for or rodeo for your maps, and then you need like World Anvil or something. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to deal with this. Let me give you one site that does all of it, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like the quick thing. I'm sure you'll ask me things about like the specific things. So like, well, I'll just let you take it there.
Yeah, for sure. So the project that you've made that's coming very soon is called Hedron. Hedron or Hedron?
Hedron. So the name comes from polyhedron, right? So any dice you roll, we support it.
That's great. That's such a great tag. It's just, I love it. Very cool. So you kind of talked about it a little bit, about like the why you kind of wanted to make something like this. You were motivated because you didn't see something and you wanted to have something for, you found it a hole and you wanted to fill it with something that was useful for you. On the website projecthedron.com, there's a bunch of cool like devlogs and everything that you've been writing, and I read in there that that one of the reasons you kind of made this site or this program or this platform was because of a system that you were in the process of making, called Call to Power. Is that still something that's like a motivator for making this platform? Was that the like impetus for wanting to have a platform like this?
It was definitely the origin, and I would say it's still a very strong driving reason. So Call to Power is a little different from other tabletop games. I mean, obviously everyone who wrote a system is going to say that, but I'm going to say like what's different, I think, is I kind of said, okay, I like having power differentials like Pathfinder has, like 1E does, and 3.5 D&D. The problem is when you have that much like power differential and you have these big numbers being thrown around, like, oh, he rolled a 76, he rolled a 25, he rolled a 106. Like things get kind of out of hand, like numerically, like when you're at a table and you're rolling a die and you have to like add like 1d6 plus 1d20 plus 98, like that gets a little cumbersome. Call to Power kind of said, you know what, instead of trying to like avoid that, let's lean into it. Let's build a system with the assumption that you live in the 21st century and you have technology to help you do these numbers, and then we can create this like mathematically perfect system, and that's what the goal of it is. So Hedron and everything Hedron does is kind of in that vein, where we're basically, I created a platform that supports call to power, but also supports me changing the rules as I was writing it. It supports
Mm.
me like making modifications, and then eventually kind of realized that like, well, if it can support everything I'm doing, it could support everything everyone else is doing. And then that's where like the thing kind of started shifting, like the motivation started shifting a little bit, because it's still, call to power is still mine. It's still something I very much care about. It's very passionate about it. But now it's like I feel a need and desire to like help my users who are coming on with their systems, their own unique creations, and they're really cool. Like a lot of the
Mhm.
stuff people's creating are really cool things to hear about. I love hearing about it. And then I'm like, okay, how can I make sure that our platform supports what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a tricky balance, right? Trying to,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, especially when people are so creative and there's so many people in the world making so many cool things, and there's like that old adage of like nothing new. There's nothing new under the sun because everybody's already done something. That which could be true, but how people combine different things can be completely different. Can make something completely new, and being able to have a space that can facilitate all of these new things does not sound simple or easy in any way.
yeah, definitely not. I would say that our biggest challenge on a Hedron side of things, like behind the scenes, is like we're constantly like, how do we design this in a way that like makes sense to everyone? Because we're
Mm,
trying to avoid code, right? Is that's our big thing. Is
right.
we're built a virtual tabletop that's like Foundry and has the ability to do everything Foundry can, but we're taking away all of the coding from it. And when you do that, well, there's a reason code is good for telling computers what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's very precise, and so it's always a balancing act of like complexity and simplicity, trying to like get this perfect match of like you can do everything you need to do, but it's not like, it's overwhelming, like you're basically coding kind of feel.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely a tricky thing that we've been wrestling with for a while, but we're doing pretty well, I would say.
Yeah. And you said that how long has this been in production? Has it been something that was a like the concept was started 7 or 8 years ago, or is that when it was like you started really thinking about it? And I ask this because I keep seeing a different name pop up occasionally with Hedron, which is tabletop mirror. Was that an original concept and you just changed the word, or tell me kind of like that kind of timeline?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, there was I write blog posts on the site as well. I'm going to mention there's a blog post about the entire history in detail, but I'm going to give you like
Okay.
the high level synopsis. So yeah, 7 or 8 years ago, I was like, okay, I need something to manage my game, and that point it was just about my game, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna build like what's essentially just like a list of items and like put it into a website format, and that's
Hmm.
basically it. Uh, and then that worked, and then it worked until I had to change something, and then I had to recode everything to make it work, and it
Mm-hmm.
was this sort of iterative process. And I would say like the origin of modern day Hedron started around like 6.5 years ago. And that
Okay.
was when I was like, okay, let's build something that I don't have to reprogram every single time something changes. And that was
Mm.
kind of like you could see where the modern day version of it came from. Like that was like, okay, let's build something more generalizable. It was called actually something even different from what you read. It was called a
Yeah.
Mops Guide back then,
Oh, okay.
um, which is a name of a character in my world that
Oh,
I
that's
was
fun.
like, okay, yeah. And so that's where it started. It was like about for like a year and a half. It was like that. I was, doing other things in life. I wasn't really paying attention to it too much. It was just like it did the job for my game. That was kind of all it needed to do. Uh, then it changed to Tabletop Mirror. That's like basically the impetus for that change was one of my other GM friends who was playing 3.5, and I mentioned I called a power similar-ish to 3.5. They were like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, this is really close to working for 3.5. Can you like make it so it works for 3.5?" And that's sort of the paradigm shift of like, okay, now we can support other systems, so let's do that. Um, that's when it became Tabletop Mirror, and then it
Mm-hmm.
was Tabletop Mirror all the way up until when we released in beta last year. And it was constantly evolving. I was working on it a little bit more seriously, but it was always like a side project. Last year we went into a open beta, as I call it, as in like I put it out to the public and said like, hey, anyone can try this out, see what you think, and let me know. And it kind of exploded, in my opinion, like as in a lot of people really seem to like want this and need this, and that's sort of like where it started shifting, but then also we acquired Rollgate. Rollgate being like the play-by-post platform for mobile. Their developer basically wanted to step away, so we acquired them to basically make sure that their community still had somewhere to go.
Hmm.
And the plan is to integrate everything, and that new chapter together, focused on homebrewing and creations and people making their own things. That's what Hedron represents. That's the fourth iteration, I suppose.
Hmm. That's rad. Yeah, I have it pulled up and I kind of am browsing through it. I finally made an account there, which was super easy. It's just you just log in with Google, and that does make it easy. But I wanted to kind of just dive into what makes it so very specifically unique, because I first heard about Hedron because of PAX Unplugged this last December, on their big press blasts, and I was looking at it and I was like, this is really interesting because, like you said, there are a bunch of different places that are doing a lot of similar quote unquote things, but like one or two things, or maybe one thing. Like there's virtual tabletop, or there's like you said, like World Anvil, who does like just put your world on here and it's a giant wiki, and then doing a little bit of digging. It was really this all-in-one platform is really what kind of stuck out to me. So I would love to just kind of take a little look at the Hedron and what the kind of things that you do provide. We don't necessarily need to get into the minutia, although sometimes the nitty-gritty can be really, really interesting. But in digging around, I saw that there was, you kind of mentioned it a little bit towards the very, very beginning, this balance between making things simple and easy to understand, but also having that like ability to make it complex and make systems intricate, and finding that balance. You have a lot of ways to make things from scratch, basically, outside of programming, like you said. So why don't we talk about the general editors that you have? So you have things for mechanics, for things that are, let's see, I literally wrote it down. Mechanics and entities, which is like anything that goes into the system. Why don't very general, but like hand it to you. What would you like to tell us?
No, I'll start from there. Let's start with the simple thing, right? Like lore. Lore is like not deeply tied to like automation, right? It's just information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a very wiki style entry, and this is something our community has always been really happy with how it works. We're actually looking at how we can improve it right now. Like that's our main UX focus, but there's only so much you can do with like a text editor. Like essentially we have a rich text editor. It's a wiki. As you're typing, you can, do like the @ sign, like you're on social media, and tag other pages that you've created, or you can even create a page on the fly. So you can be like, this kingdom is ruled by Queen Talifa, and then if that page exists, it can tag the page. If it doesn't exist, you can create it on the fly and keep writing, and then go back to that page later and flesh it out later. So it's all about like this, just making it as easy for you as a GM or homebrewer or creator to just do what you want to do, which is the actual fun part of world building.
Mm-hmm.
The philosophy I have towards it is sort of like, let's get out of your way. Let's just make it easy for you to do what you want to do and just get out of your way.
Okay.
The mechanics side is a little bit more involved, but I'm going to talk about like one specific part of the mechanics thing, which we did a few months ago that I think was like a really big shift in our paradigm that was for the better. We added these things called macros, and macros are sort of like recipe books, and you can attach them to anything. So you can have items have macros, spells have macros, whatever. And they're, as I said, they're like a recipe. So you tell it like when this macro is executed, and it could either be because someone cast a spell, someone equipped an item, someone used an item, etc. It will go through a series of steps that you defined. So you could be like, hey, roll an athletics check and then compare the athletics check to the enemy's athletic check. And then if it's higher, do this thing. And it can kind of do all this. And the important thing is you're not writing about it in code. You're kind of writing about it as a recipe book. Like it's like step 1, compute this number. Step 2, have the enemy roll the same check. Step 3, compare those numbers. Step 4, do this if the number's higher or whatever. So it's very removed from the code and closer to how, as a system designer or a homebrewer, that's how you talk, right? Like when we talk about an item, you say this item gives you a +5 to athletics. In Hedron, you can literally write like add +5 to athletics and it will understand what you're talking about.
Speaking of macros, that's the term that I was the most familiar with playing with Roll20, that their virtual tabletop, because they have the capability of like making macros and things of that nature, which is something that I'd never really been. I haven't GM'd in a really long time, and it's something that like was interesting, but I never thought of like, I don't need to use that. But if I was making either my own system or wanting to put everything on one platform, that would be something that would be very interesting for me to do, especially if I'm making something from like the ground up and not necessarily porting over, say, like 5th edition SRD situations. But that does give a lot of flexibility, like we keep saying, of like, if you're making your own stuff, you want to be able to make it as specific to what you're making as possible, which is really, it's really cool. So here's a tangential question, and you may have answered it earlier and I just forgot. This specific system of not programming, but just shy of it, all of this like back end mechanic situation, is this something that you made yourself, or is it something that you there was already a framework in play and you just are utilizing it in a different, unique way?
This is something entirely custom made. So,
okay.
The Hedron engine is something I kind of mentioned loosely in our community. It is something that my community has like realized over time. This thing is a beast because it is a giant file. Like, for any of your programmers that watch, it's a over 4,000 line file, and there's no way to split it because everything's dependent on each other. It's really smart, actually. So to try to just really give a high-level overview, it basically allows it so everything has a stat block, from your items to your spells to everything, and it knows the context in which it's being used. So it's like the spell knows it's a level 3 spell. The spell knows it's being cast because you're a wizard. The item knows that it's being equipped by Bob the Goblin. It knows all of that information, and it can like reference specific things. It's really intelligent about how it kind of does things. There's no AI, of course, or anything like that. It's just very designed in a way that makes it really easy for these kind of calculations to happen without you as a person having to think about like what's actually happening.
Okay. That's so, I am definitely not a programmer,
Sure.
or like, I appreciate it immensely. And I sometimes, on a very rare occasion, understand about like a microscopic amount of it. It's so fascinating to me, though, from just a purely just seeing it standpoint of, I'm looking at the site now. I'm seeing all of the things that it can do, and I haven't even like dug into it yet. And knowing that you, a human being, made this happen with the help of computers, of course, is just really, really cool.
Right.
So it's be proud of at least this. And I know that there's probably a lot of future plans, which we can definitely dive into in a bit.
I know some of the sorry to interrupt. I just want to mention, like, so if you're going around the site, you'll actually find almost everything it's displayed to you is actually going through the engine. So if you like hover over numbers in like a stat block, you'll actually find that a little pop-up shows up, and that pop-up is telling you what the engine sees when it's calculating things. So it'll show you, like, instead of it just saying like this item adds your strength to damage, it'll say this item adds +11 to damage. And if you hover over that 11, it'll say the 11 is actually your strength, and then any bonuses you have and all that. It basically does an on-the-fly breakdown of every number anywhere. So if you're ever wondering, like, why is this number so high or so low, you can look at it and be like, oh, these are all the bonuses that are applied. These are what's happening. These are how they're interacting with each other. These are all the effects that are on me, basically, that are affecting this roll.
Okay.
And that's for every number on the site. And a lot of words, too, actually. A lot of words are actually also computed by the engine. So
that's wild. That it feels like it's so it. You said it, that your community had already said it, but it does. The more that you tell me that it's doing, the bigger and bigger it just seems like. It's just humongous to even think about.
It's what kind of enables us to do something that, like you mentioned, like Roll20 macros.
Mhm.
It's what enables us to do something a little different from what Roll20 does. Like Roll20, you're almost programming those macros, like almost, like you're doing slash commands and you're setting up like the one by one.
Mhm.
On Hedron, you don't do that. You can just say 1d20 plus strength, and the engine will be like, "Hey, you said strength. I know what your strength is," and then it will roll. It'll ask you to roll 1d20, and then it'll add your strength to it and give you the final number.
Oh, okay.
And if you
That's
hover over it,
so
it'll
great.
say, I had you roll 1d20 and added
Yeah.
your strength, and this is what your strength was. So,
Yeah. And that for me, from a player perspective, well, even from someone who would be running, for example, like D&D or Pathfinder or anything like that, having that back end kind of in place already, yes, I may have to, if I'm, running the game or setting up a system or anything, do a little bit of work at the beginning to make sure that it is running the way that I want it to run. But in the heat of the moment, in the game itself, that simplifies things so much to keep the game going, to keep it like you're not having to stop and remember what 17, key configuration do I need to press in order to make the thing happen that I want to happen. So
yes.
I really enjoy that. And again, like tapping into what you were saying earlier, that balance between making something complex but also making it easy to use and easy to understand and simple is not easy. It's not easy to do this sort of stuff, everybody. I wanted to touch on the virtual tabletop side of it. It's one of the things that I haven't actually been able to see or haven't found a way to actually view yet. But I have definitely dabbled in a good handful of them over the last 5+ years. So what I'm going to use the biggest one that probably 90% of the people who would be watching this know of, Roll20. Comparing one thing to another, how would you compare yours to what Roll20 does? Only because that's the one I'm the most familiar with, and I want to know how yours is the same and how it's different, how you might think it's better, and so on and so forth.
Sure, yeah. I'm going to start with saying, like, I think Roll20 has a lot of things that it will have the edge in. A lot of and this is true for actually any VTT. Like, we are the new kids on the block. We are still catching up. Like, we don't have any like fancy lighting effects. We don't have anything like super like D&D specific. Like, I would say, and something I've often said actually is that for people who are playing by the book, like core D&D 5e, like, the flagship tabletop game, right, so to speak, you will probably just find that like Roll20, D&D Beyond, etc., like they're all more tailored towards it because they're like, oh, like they're designed with that first. Because Hedron is designed with not really a specific system in mind, there are some things we have to give up. And I'm telling you all the bad stuff first, right? It's like,
Sure,
okay, we have
yeah.
to like give up on like, okay, we can't specifically like say everything is like, like 5e related, and we can't structure everything that's like, oh, here are your spells, here are your feats, here are your items, here are your whatever. Like, things are a little different in that certain sense. But then here's the part that I think is good. Here's where we really shine. Because we are aiming for this generalist approach and we're kind of making no assumptions about anything, essentially, we try to minimize all of the assumptions we make about the system. We have so much flexibility available to you when you're setting up like how you as an individual want to play the game. So I'll put it this way. Let's say your player wants to play in like, a Lancer campaign, for example. When you're doing that, you can set up a character sheet, and ideally, like the person who made the system would put in their character sheet into Hedron. And the character sheet is just like a UX layout. It's like how are your numbers laid out on a page. And so when you as a player use it, you can use that character sheet as is, and it'll just render it as is. There you go, and you're good to go. Or you can be like, I want to change the sheet a little bit. You can copy it, and it's just like editing like a Illustrator file or like a drawing canvas. You just kind of draw whatever changes you want to do, move some numbers around. And again, like moving the numbers around, it just kind of says like, this is your strength score, this is your this score, this is your this score. You just kind of move it to wherever you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll know what's happening. So you can basically on the fly change your character sheet, adjust things, tailor it for your experience. The idea is all about customization. So like there's nothing you can't do. Like the virtual tabletop is as minimalist as of an assumption as possible, and
Mhm.
it leaves you the tools to build like a custom character sheet that's fully adaptable, that's fully interactive. You can have buttons on your character sheet. You can have like auto filtering of your items, so you could have like items automatically sort into different categories, like all these kind of things. Uh, so that's kind of like the high level, like big difference, right? Is we're a lot more about just giving control to you, but at the cost of because we're giving control to you, it's very dependent on how well you set it up. And by
Sure.
setup is not necessarily you set it up, but however well, whatever the creator of the content you're using set it up. So like
Yeah.
if that's the Wizards of the Coast sets it up well, you'll have a good experience. If they don't set it up well, then your experience will be just as good. But you could always make it better.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that there is an attractiveness to that that openness of being able to configure things in a way that works per individual person's level. Because correct me if I'm wrong, if is that editing of like character sheets, for example, that you said, is that something that if I was running a game I'd be able to do that and it's implemented for all of my players? Or is that something that I, as a player in a campaign, can edit my own character sheet to be visually how I want it to be organized? Or both?
Either or. Either or. So
That's fantastic.
you can share your character sheet layouts with whoever you want. So everything on Hedron has a really comprehensive sharing panel. Like you can share with everyone, share with specific people, give editing rights to specific people, kind of like Google Docs in the sense of like that kind of sharing approach. And whoever you share with it can access it. So like if you like make a special like 5e wizard tailored character sheet, you can share it with all your other wizard friends, and then they can just use it in their campaigns. Like, it won't affect anyone else. And that's kind of like one of the big benefits is we're all about like people. I in my opinion, players will always customize their character sheets a little bit.
Yeah.
We're just we're enabling that by thinking of it first rather than at the end.
Yeah.
So like anyone can create a character sheet. Anyone can share that character sheet. You can have your GM create a character sheet and everyone uses that one. You could also create your own. Doesn't really matter. You can also swap character sheets on the fly. Like it's kind of like a tabbed approach. So you don't actually have to have just one sheet. You could be like, I use this sheet because I like how its social encounter stuff is set up, but I use this sheet because I like how its spells organized, or I like this sheet because it's a good inventory sheet or whatever. And they're just tabs on the VTT and you can swap between them in like less than a second.
Yeah, I like that element of customizability, especially if it's like on an individual level for accessibility cases too. Because like I have ADHD, and the way that my brain organizes information is very different to like how my spouse organizes visual information, and I have to write a lot more things down than he might need to, or what somebody else who I'm playing with, or like I need to have all of these stats in this place. I've saved so many, specifically for like D&D 5th edition, so many like customized character sheets that other people have made, because I've never found like the one, and when I did, I lost the file somewhere and I don't know where it is, and it's made me so sad to this day. But knowing that you're able to like tweak it as much as you can to work best, not only for like me as someone who's running it for my system, for my game, for what I'm making, but also as someone playing the game, so that I can play it as well as I want to. Lovely. I love that. Big A+.
Yeah. I think something else that's really nice is that you don't even have to look at character sheets the same way that their creator wants to look at them. You can look at someone else's character sheet your way, so everyone can really tailor theirs for just them. So
that's so cool. That's so cool. I love that. I'm an exceptional advocate for like accessibility in any kind of form. So like this is like big good, big plus. You mentioned your community a lot, and I know that there's one of the big target points when you first go onto the website is that there is a lot of like community interaction. We've kind of talked about it a little bit here about being able to share content that you made, that you have like a Discord space, there's a Reddit, there's all this like external community elements to it as well. I also know that I'm kind of like combining a couple of things here, but I know that there's also a marketplace that is kind of in the works. If you want to talk about like the community element, including the marketplace and what your vision for all of that is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the community management. Yeah, my community is fantastic. I say this like literally every interview anyone brings them up. They are fantastic. I'm so grateful for all of them. Something we do and have a really strong philosophy about is not trying to create like barriers from our community to talk to me. So like if you go on our Discord, you go on our Reddit, you go on our Facebook, whatever, there, if you say something, I will read it. Like
Mm-hmm.
almost definitely. And I don't plan that ever changing. Like we used to have, a very small community and we've slowly been growing and at this point across our platforms we're like somewhere around 3,000-4,000 at least.
Nice. Very
And we're
cool.
still and then that's not even counting the actual users on the site, which is even higher. But uh, all those people, like I read all of those comments, like all of those things, all those messages. We keep track of like when people mention Hedron, even if it's not in a thread that we control, like it's like a random Reddit thread, like I show up. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like one of those things that people have been like, how does he know? I don't know. I have my ways. Um, but yeah, like I show up in random Reddit threads, I respond to things, and I'm very open to like just kind of hearing like both the good and the bad, right? Like as much as I want to hear like, oh, the site's amazing, it's perfect, I also want to hear what's wrong with it because
Mm-hmm.
that's how we ultimately progress, right? Like macros were largely driven by like people being like, I am having a hard time designing this to do what I want. I'm having a hard time doing this or that. And I'm like, okay, let's revisit that entire aspect, rewrite it from the ground up. And that's basically how macros came to be. And that's
Mm-hmm.
something that I very much believe in is that like we shouldn't stick to something just because it's the way it's been done. We should stick to
Mm-hmm.
things the way that people want it to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely agree with that. From a community standpoint, from like a lot of other facets of how I think about things, is that the the idea of if it's not broke, don't fix it doesn't quite apply to a lot of things these days.
Yeah.
Where like it might not be broken, but there's definitely, the if something has been done the same way on every other place and it's not serving people here, there's a reason people are here and not over on those other places, and it's because you're giving them something that they can't
Yeah.
quite get somewhere else.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um, to shift gears a little bit to the marketplace.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like the marketplace is something we've always wanted to do, and now we rolled it out already in like a very early stage. It's basically a place for anyone to create anything they create, they can put on our marketplace. We also have one of the best like revenue shares. Like people always ask, like, what's the cost of this? We take only 15%. And actually, we only
Okay.
take 10%. We take the 5% goes to credit card processing.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
remaining 85 is all yours, whatever you want to do with it. The vision we have, and obviously if something's free, like, that's perfectly fine, or pay what you want, that's fine too. But the vision we have is that every tabletop game should be able to launch their crowdfunding with a live demo on a virtual tabletop. Like that was kind of my big
Mm.
thing is like, whenever I saw tabletop like role-playing games being on a Kickstarter or BackerKit or etc., it always felt like the stretch goal for like the around 20K mark was like, oh, virtual tabletop support. And I was just like, that's crazy. Like most indie developers do not have 20K to just throw at like making a virtual
Exactly.
tabletop.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm here like saying Hedron is free. Not
Mm-hmm.
even just that. It's we'll give you 85% of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's kind of like the vision we have. And so far, we've already kind of started putting things on there. So Black Ballad from Storyteller's Forge, they're a 5e expansion all about what happens after your party TPKs. And so
Mm.
they're already on our marketplace. We're planning to add several more. Some of the ones I can mention are Eldritch Automata by Genna Gaming. They're
Love
they're
them.
actually already on Hedron. We just have to flip the switch to be like, yes, you can buy it.
Oh,
Um,
perfect.
and then Gilmoral, Technographic Nightmare. It's a little more indie-based system by Tales Untold. It is a big sci-fi and combined with like sort of Bloodborne kind of vibes. So
Mm.
you'll hear more about it. And there's a lot more in the works, but I just kind of want to mention a few of them. We're also talking to Foreteller, maybe the deck of many dice, and so on and so forth.
Mm.
Um, things like that. Uh, the point being that like the marketplace is all about just giving creators the ability to make a living off their creations essentially.
Sure.
And it doesn't even have to be a full game. You can sell things as small as like I made one homebrew 5e item, or I made one
Mm-hmm.
like homebrew 5e spell, or one homebrew like call to power spell or whatever, and like
Mm-hmm.
you can still do that. And it's not exclusive. You still get 85%. We don't care what you do with it. We're not taking any rights of it. We're just distributing it on your behalf. We're all about
Mm-hmm.
enabling you, not doing something for us
Yeah.
necessarily.
And that's something that I'm sure, potentially unbeknownst to you, I am also a small business owner. I'm a co-founder of Goblin Society Games, which people watching this may be also familiar with. And we make just the TTRPG stuff that we want to see in the space, things that we saw like maybe don't have a lot of. So our flagship book was 300 unique magic items for D&D 5th edition, all with its own, art and like flavor text and like everything in this like hardcover book. And we've been going from that onto other things as well. But it got me interested in reading like the legal minutia, quote unquote, of like what are the terms and conditions of selling something on here. And I read it, y'all. I've read a lot of them. One, it's very easy to read, so don't be afraid of that. Unlike a lot of places, very easy to read. But yeah, it was very cool to see like, nah, we don't own any rights to it. There are some sites that are very adamant about exclusivity when it comes to selling on their virtual marketplaces. And that can be very frustrating when you can either reach more people or get a little bit more profit for the things that you've put like your time and effort into. But that does mean saying, I can't go on here anymore. And it's just kind of, it's a frustrating battle that, in society these days we have to play. But you made it very, very simple to, all you have to do is just put it on there. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always
really
kind of told my community also, like, and like they know this, like if they ever read something in our legal details that sounds weird, it's probably not intended. Like, just come tell me. It's actually happened before. Some people have emailed me and be like, this is kind of hard to understand. I feel like you're taking my like one of our first drafts of our terms of service, like it almost sounded like we were taking the rights to your game. And I was like, no. What we meant to say was we are taking rights to distribute your game on your behalf as per your instructions, not that we're taking your rights.
Yeah.
So the general gist is like, if you ever see something that's weird, email me, message me, something. It'll be changed within 24 hours. It's like consistently like, we are not trying to do anything like weird. We're just trying to distribute your game because you told us to.
Yeah. And also just like also in a good way, not in a, in a positive way. You are also protecting yourself and protecting whoever works with you from being taken advantage of or anything of that nature. And it is the world we live in that you do have to also protect yourself, protect your own IP and all of those things as well. And I think that there's an exceptionally generous and healthy amount of both of those things happening here. And I very love it. It's very nice. I want to touch on some other well, before I touch on that, one of the things that keeps striking me is that you always come back around to community, and it really, really like is very apparent and obvious, at least to me, that like while this may have started out as a personal passion project for like yourself and your interest, it has absolutely evolved into something where your excitement about the community that has come up around it is now it's palpable. Just like you talking about it, you talking about like all of these cool things that are being added, these things that you keep changing for the betterment of your community space. It's a fantastic thing that I hope people do realize, is that you're a singular person who is doing a cool thing for people to have a cool place to do their cool things. And I very much applaud that. I think a lot of times that gets lost in the sauce, so to speak, of trying to make something profitable and trying to make something like big and flashy and like the next XYZ, whatever it is. So I really appreciate like your focus on community first, and then, you know, as much as I would love to say community is the best thing and the only thing we need to think about, you also, it would be great to be paid for it sometimes. So with that said, there is some talk about monetization as far as like supporting Hedron and supporting you and whoever else comes on to create it. You do have some merch, which I did see some of it. You have some rad dice. I saw it at PAX. I stopped by the booth for a little bit at the Gehenna Gaming booth, and you had the dice there. And y'all, they're really pretty. The pictures on on ProjectHedron.com are good, but I can kid you not, they look even better in person. They look so good.
I say the exact same thing. I'm like, oh my god, like the pictures are nice, but they're not nearly as nice as they are in person. And I actually have more merch coming soon, including, I mean, it's not new nerds. Anyone on our platform for a while will know the dice trays are coming soon. So we will have Hedron dice trays. They're actually right behind me. They're in partnership with Norse Foundry. So
nice.
Definitely high quality, really nice trays to go along with your nice dice. I always kind of believe that if I'm going to sell you something, I want it to be worth it, right?
Yes.
Like, everything
100% same.
I don't want to give you like plastic dice for like $20. Like I'm like, I'd rather give you really nice glass dice or really nice like resin dice or something like high quality, really nice leather dice tray, things like that. And you know, give you something worth buying and not just like here's another generic thing off the shelf.
Yeah, so. and that is something that I 100% resonate with. If I'm going to do something, I want to make it worth not only like my time, but also the amount of money that I know that people will spend on it. Because spoiler, everybody, the dice are worth the pretty penny that you pay for them. I guarantee it. And if you don't want a whole set, you can just get a D20, and it's just still really nice and really good and really awesome. So there's that. I know that in one of your most recent blog posts, I think, or community posts, there was some mention of other potential possibilities for merch or for other like partnerships to help support Hedron and all of those extra things. There was also a discussion of like a subscription system, and I know that there's other mentions of it elsewhere, like in the quick start guide area of the website. Do you want to talk a bit about that subscription system, what it might look like, what comes free, what you're thinking about potentially having, like what does the Hedron subscription style look like, especially compared to what you were talking about earlier of like every site needing its own kind of subscription service?
Yeah, so this part where I think a lot of your GMs are gonna be like, oh boy, time to get ready. Let me just say this. It'll be free for almost everyone, including GMs. The plan is, and this is like, I don't think this will change. We have like essentially a storage limit, but instead of it measuring something kind of obtuse like megabytes or gigabytes, because like who knows how many megabytes or gigabytes like an item is, right? We are instead measuring it with number of pages. And so everyone, regardless of who you are, for free gets approximately 600 pages. And some I will say some things are a little bit more than one page, like character build, like a full character build, even if it's like 20 levels, 30 levels, 40 levels, however many levels of planning you put into it, that'll always be 10 pages, no matter how many levels you plan out. But generally speaking, most things are 1-to-1, like 90% of the site is 1-to-1. And so 600 is enough to do a lot. Like even as a GM, that's enough to do a lot. In the entire 1 year that the beta has been running, only like 4 or 5 people have passed that 600 point. Because you just don't need to. Like it's just so much content. Like that is, it's hard to like visualize how much 600 pages is. Like if you had a textbook in high school, that's 600 pages. And this is also a website. So like one page in real life is not one page on a website. One page on a website's much larger.
Yeah, like the I'm thinking of like a physical like correlation because the player's handbook for D&D 5th edition, the hardcover standard sized, is roughly, I think, 180, maybe 200, maybe just over 200 pages of like 8.5 by, just slightly larger than 8.5 by 11 paper. And so it's six of those. It's like most of the books that they've made for D&D 5th edition now would be, that's the amount that you would have to write, essentially, roughly.
Yeah.
For it to get to that cap.
Yeah, and like even measuring like actually physically, like when I put the 5e SRD, so like the entirety of the SRD, items, spells, monsters, everything, blah blah blah, that barely broke past the 600 point. And so like, yeah, we're basically saying that like, if you do a lot, and we're kind of, the philosophy we have is like, if you're doing enough that you need a subscription of any kind, you're probably also selling your stuff. Like you're probably a publisher of some variety. In which case, we have this very expensive price tag of $2 a month for doubling your storage. $5 a month, 5 pentuples your storage. And you know, it goes up from there. But like the highest we have is like $20 a month, and then you get everything. You can just infinite storage, do whatever you want. Like full like entirely under control. So that's kind of where it's looking. I will also put a little caveat to all this in that we are planning to rework how we count things to actually give you more storage space. Because right now it's one page includes an image. So like, with or without an image, it's one page. Okay. We're thinking we'll make it so we'll double your storage, but then you have to pay one page for the image and one page for the page itself. The logic being that most pages don't actually have images. So you'll actually get more storage space this way.
Yeah.
But, you know, caveat. But generally speaking, we're trying to make it so the subscription is, as much as it gives you some like nice vanity features, like if you go to our publisher tiers, like our $10 a month, $20 a month tiers, then you get a vanity URL. So instead of just being like, oh, my game is at projecthedron.com / a random string of numbers, it's my game is 5e.projecthedron.com, or my game is like call to power projecthedron.com, etc. Like those vanity features that aren't nice to have, but are, or that are nice to have, but are not like necessary. No necessary feature will ever be behind a paywall.
Yeah, which is great. And I think some sites, some subscription sites kind of have that, where like Roll20 as a core VTT absolutely is free. Anybody can kind of put stuff on there, but there is like a limit. There's a limit to what you can upload yourself. There's a limit to like, there's just limitations, which is just kind of how it is. It's that like that frustrating thing of at some point you do have to be able to afford to keep the lights on, and the Hedron lights on, even if you're not making profit yourself, which I don't think, based on everything I've read, isn't like your driving force, is not to like, I'm going to live off of Hedron pennies. Yeah, it still costs money to have a server, to have a website, to like, you know, time is money, and time to like do things to make the website better, you know.
Yeah, and to put a little bit more light into it, because I'm very transparent about this, because I think this is something people care about. Like, this is something that I feel like the big VTs kind of avoid talking about. Like, oh, how much money did you make last year? Don't worry about it. I don't get paid anything for Hedron. I don't plan to. Any money that I make on Hedron right now goes right back into Hedron. That means getting people to work on marketing stuff. That means getting people to draw art for the asset library that people can use. Sort of community content, essentially. Things like that. Like, I don't expect, and I don't plan on ever being like full-time Hedron, or if it is, it's several years down the line. It's more of like, Hedron is something I want to do because it is a good thing to do, not necessarily it is this Roll20 of virtual tabletops. And that kind of quick segues into a little thing I wanted to mention, because it's also community oriented and things. Something else we're doing is something called the Guild program, which is a program that we're using to basically, as I mentioned, like we use the money we get from Hedron to go back into Hedron for like marketing and getting virtual tabletops and things like that. But we want to also help creators who are aspiring to make their game a reality. So essentially, this is a program that we'll be mentioning a little bit more publicly soon. to just give a little preview to your listeners and viewers,
Mhm.
we're going to have this program where you sign up and then you don't pay anything up front. You pay at the end. We're basically going to be giving you a plan of like, here's where you are now. Here's how we get everything onto Hedron and working. And then we go to crowdfunding, and then we have a successful crowdfunding campaign. And then at the end of it, we just take 10% of the result or so, roughly. We're still getting the exact number, but something like that. And the rest is yours. So the idea is we're helping people who are like all alone, don't really know what to do, don't really have a plan, helping them form a plan, get that to market, get it to everyone they need to, basically have a proper launch, and then enable them from both the Hedron side of things, but also the marketing and public side of things. So that's kind of like the holistic plan. And, this is, again, just goes to show like any money we get, but just go back into Hedron, right?
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. It's kind of like a mentorship program, but also like the only thing I could think of was like, I don't know why, like a wedding coordinator, facilitator, like a program, not a program, a project manager. There it is. Almost of like taking exactly what you said, taking people who are not well versed in crowdfunding or well versed in like making something bigger and want to take that next step but are floundering because it's big and everybody seems to be doing it, quote unquote. And that is really rad, and that's like a really cool way to continue giving back to the community, because like experience and knowledge are things that are so incredibly valuable to be able to share with people, and giving to the community in that way. And you get something back from it. You do get like a payout, but still, like the purpose is not, hey, we're going to get a check at the end. It's to help people, again, facilitating, giving people the ability to make cool things so that they can keep making cool things is just so rad. I love it.
Yeah, and I think like something else, like just to like completely like be really explicit about it, is like that check we get at the end is just going to help the next person.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
yeah.
It's like if the guild program becomes a super successful thing and every single person wants to be like, I want to be in the guild program, great. That means we get to bring on more people so we can help more creators, right? Like that's the end goal. The end goal is not like, oh, I get to take a paycheck home. The end result is we get more people putting their stuff out in the world, and ultimately we're hoping that makes the tabletop space a more fun place to be. Like that's the objective.
Yeah. I absolutely love it. I love everything. And like hearing about all of the ins and outs, there is an aspect to this that I am curious about, and by this I mean Hedron as a whole. I mentioned before that I'm not quite I don't have a programmer's brain, which is good for like a lot of what Hedron is. There are, however, what I've noticed is that there can be a little bit of a learning curve of like making sure, knowing what things can be done in what ways, and understanding the vocabulary and everything. And I know that there are some quick start guides. Is there a potential for having like tutorial videos, like in-depth tutorial videos or something similar to those that may be planned for the future to help people like myself who are much more visual learners to better understand how the platform can best be used?
Sure. Yeah. That's a great question. I'm going to start with the very honest confession that I do not think our tutorials are great. They are acceptable, maybe. And I'm not happy with them. There's a couple of problems and a lot of excuses I could be of like, why is it not the case? But ultimately, I think the thing that people want to know about is like, what's our plan, right? Like, what are we trying to do? So something I'm working on, and not even like working on, I'll tell you right now that it's already in the release for this week. Like, as in, we do a weekly update. Every week we do a release. This week's update is bringing a new feature called guided tutorials, where basically instead of having to go to a tutorials website and then there's this giant page of like, this is all the information you need to know, we'll keep that. But we're also going to have buttons on the site exactly. And this, I have to double check my UX people, like where's the best way to put this button. But if you click this button, it'll basically darken the whole screen. and then it'll show like a little dialogue that says like welcome to the tutorial, and then it'll like walk you through different parts of the site and like click on this and do this, and this is what happens when you do this. And the idea is that instead of having a written long form tutorial, it's like an interactive on the site tutorial, kind of like how some video games at the start of the game there's like that tutorial where everything's darkened and it's like, oh, click this to see this and then click this and that kind of thing. So that is rolling out very soon.
Awesome.
And this is also still like a stopgap, I think. So short term, we're going to try to include these guided tutorials, and if people seem to be responding well, and the hope is, you know, having an inbuilt tutorial rather than a separate like long document, that'll be a good start. We're still going to eventually add more documentation, like written form documentation for people who prefer that. But then ultimately, yes, we want to do videos eventually. A lot of this kind of comes down to resources, right? Like as in, because we're not trying to make some giant corporate industry, right? We're trying to instead just work our way up slowly. The more support we get, the faster we can get to a point where we can be like, yes, we can have a designated video guy whose whole job is to record tutorials. That would be great. It takes time to get there. And of course, UX changes hopefully make it so there's less tutorial needed. But we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, this kind of segues really, really great into one of the last things I wanted to talk about, which is you talked off and on throughout our conversation, but thinking without borders, thinking without a price tag, thinking about what Hedron is, what do you hope when you see in the future, where do you think Hedron could be? What do you hope Hedron is able to do? You know, assuming that you're able to break past any barriers that are holding you back, or you know, that the sky is the limit and even beyond that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So like, yeah, there's a lot of like short-term things I want to get out, obviously, but long-term, my mission is a couple of things. One is what I mentioned a little earlier about like, I want every Kickstarter to be able to launch with a virtual tabletop. Like, I want them to not be like, oh, I need to allocate 20K to a virtual tabletop. I can just have it. And I want people to feel empowered to create things. Like, I don't want people to be like, oh my God, it's so daunting. Like, as someone who's done some system design, it's already hard enough. Like, you have to be someone who knows math and knows statistics and then knows how to roll dice and knows how to have fun. Like, all these things, like, there's so many hats, and then there's UX, and then there's marketing, and then social media management, all these different hats. And I'm like, I want to make it so it doesn't feel so scary. I want people to be able to say, I just had a cool idea for a game and now it's out there. Like, it should be that easy. And my vision is that anyone should be able to do this. And it's not just about being a big creator. Like, you don't have to be Wizards of the Coast. You don't have to be Paizo. You don't have to be CDPR to make a game. You could just be a guy in the garage playing a game with a couple of friends at a table. And that should be enough. The idea is I kind of want to bring TTRPGs to the 21st century and make it so anyone can use them if they want it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. There's a gaming convention that I help with called OrcaCon, and the biggest thing, it's mostly board games, but you said something there that resonates so deeply with the ideas of that convention, which is games are for everyone. And that really, really sounded very similar to what you were saying, of like making it so that games can be made by anyone. Also, anybody can make games, and breaking down the barriers of entry into making games. This is an exceptionally great way to kind of facilitate making games. You're doing all of the really, really hard stuff to make it so that somebody who wants to jump in and try their hand at making something brand new still has to do a little work, because it's fun to do things, but it also is work. But you're making it easier than sitting in the middle of, your garage saying, well, then what do I do? You're giving them all of that things. You're handing it to them and handing your hand and say, here, let me help you also. And I love it. I love how community focused it is. And I've said that already a couple of times, and I'll continue saying it because it's so important to me.
Likewise.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking about Hedron. Hedron. I'm gonna say it wrong every time. It's the same like Settlers of Catan versus Catan. I'm gonna say it wrong half of the time. But everybody here, you can go to Project Hedron. I did it. .com to see more. But very excitingly, version 1.0 is launching next month in February of 2025, right?
Yeah, we're very excited. Lots of things to get done before then, but
yeah,
you know, we'll slide in right before the temple door closes.
How are you feeling about that official launch as a final like closing feel? How now that you're here, looking back 6+ years from now, or to now, you're here, version 1.0. How's that feel?
It feels pretty crazy, honestly. Like it still always feels like there's a bunch of things left to do, a bunch of things left to fix. But like, I think someone said it pretty well. It's like, it's really come a long way, like super far. Even in the last year, like you can ask some of the people who've been on our server since like February last year.
Mm-hmm.
It's gone a long way in just 10 years, in just like the 10 months, 11 months since then.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so incredible to see how far it's come, and that it's sort of like I have to realize that even though I will always see its flaws, I realize that it's gotten pretty good, and I need to like start this next chapter. It doesn't mean that we're stopping updates. Doesn't mean anything's slowing down. If anything, it means we're speeding up. Like we're ready for that next chapter to become something more than just a backyard project or like a niche obscure thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's exciting. And it's really especially exciting. Actually, this is something more exciting than all of that is it's really exciting that there are creators who found us like a year ago and are like, yeah, I'm done on Hedron. Like I'm ready to like put out my system. I'm ready to do it. That's and bring it to reality. Like seeing a game come together from nothing to Hedron and having it virtual tabletop supported, incredible. Like it's been so fantastic. Like some of these people are just like blindsiding me with like how amazing their system looks on Hedron. Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't even realize that I gave you the tools to do this.
That's so cool. That's so awesome. Everybody go shout about it. You have time and it's not going anywhere. So you can keep shouting about it even after version 1.0 is out. So go check it out, everybody. Varun, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much. Tell the world where if you want to be found as an individual, where people can find more about Hedron. Anything else you wanna shout about? This is your shouting moment. Shout away.
Yeah, I'm never good at the shouting moment, but I'll say ProjectHedron.com. If you get any misspelling, you'll get it right anyway. Alternatively, we have a subreddit, r/Hedron, Discord, discord.gg/Hedron, so on and so forth, Instagram, Facebook, and so on. Blue Sky even. So, come join us on a platform created by homebrewers for homebrewers.
Heck yeah.
That's our official tagline, by the way.
It's great. It's everything about make games, everybody. Make more games, play more games. Hedron. I see it again. Hedron's a great place to do that. So if you've ever thought about making games, if you have an entire world and you want it all in one place, pointing at me, Hedron is definitely a great place to check out and see if it is a good fit for you. Thank you again, Varun, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out, watching, listening. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.